We've got the final two players due up for today in our end-of-year Duke men's basketball season review. We'll officially be able to turn the page onto the new season. Let's have some fun here on this episode of Locked On Blue Devils.
Hi, everybody. Dick Vitale. Hey, make sure you listen, man, to Locked On Blue Devils with JJ Jackson. He's awesome, baby.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson, and it is so great to have you here with us on Tuesday, May 28th, 2024. K Academy officially started today inside Cameron Indoor Stadium. It's going to be great over the next few days, seeing all of the former Blue Devils and current players of the roster making their way through the building. But before we talk to you about any of that, we, of course, have our final two players due up today for our end-of-season reviews. We're going to be talking about Sean Stewart and TJ Power. Both players, funny enough, have wound up transferring away from Duke. Let's talk about the seasons that they had, and were there any signs that this could have ultimately been the destination that they would go into at the end of this past season? Could we see those transfers potentially coming from both of those guys? And I, of course, will have that conversation with our very good friend Jordan Mann here on today's show. If you have not done so already, please be sure to follow us on X at LO_Blue Devils. I'm there as well at _JJ_Jackson_. Be sure to follow this podcast for free wherever it is that you get your podcast. Hit that subscribe button. Go ahead and leave us a 5-star rating and written review on the Apple Podcast platform. And lastly, if you watch our show each and every day on YouTube, a special shout out to all of you everydayers. You mean the world to me. Please make sure that you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It means a lot when you could support us in that regard. Again, on X at LO_Blue Devils, and I'm on X as well at _JJ_Jackson_. Had a really good episode of Mailbag Monday yesterday with Kevin Conley. Any questions that you want to have answered, make sure that you send us a message on X at LO_Blue Devils or by email, lockedonbluedevils@gmail.com, and we'll be able to answer those for you. So without further ado, we'll bring him on in. Here is Jordan Mann back with us once again. J-Man, thanks for the time today. How are you, pal?
I'm good, man. Yes, feels good to be back on. Obviously 3 days last week, so ready to get back to it, man.
Yeah, let's do it, man. You did a great job with some of those end-of-year reviews that we were having for guys on the Duke roster. Got a couple of more players left to go, guys that had meaningful minutes. When we get deeper into the bench, it's a little bit more difficult to kind of discuss what we saw from these guys because, again, the playing time is limited. But as we'll see year in and year out, that's going to just continue to be the case. And this season, just broad overall, it happened to be Sean Stewart and TJ Power were the guys that really just didn't get much run out there on the floor at all.
Yeah, but look, I mean, that's what freshmen are. Like, obviously, Duke has the exception of the one-and-done era, like we've always talked about. But it's okay that those two guys had learning curves. It just sucks that Duke will not be the beneficiary now for the rest of their careers because they, like you said, are elsewhere with Sean Stewart going to Ohio State and TJ Power going to UVA.
So our last two guys that we got to talk about, there also is the likes of Jaden Shute and Christian Reeves. Both of those guys transferred away from the program. However, they redshirted this past year for Duke basketball. So not a whole lot that we can review when you're not out there on the floor competing in games, man. That's how that goes.
Yeah, the only note that we have for them is just they transferred inside the ACC, so we'll be seeing a lot more of them.
Absolutely. All right, let's talk about Sean Stewart, the freshman season that he had for the Blue Devils. Of course, a early commit in the class for Duke in terms of their freshman class that they had a season ago. His family had long ties with Grant Hill, and Sean Stewart grew up a lifelong Duke fan and got to fulfill his dream of playing basketball for the Duke Blue Devils. It ends up being just one season. He was one of your favorite players to watch. You talked about the motor that he had all season long, although you had great analogies for us time to time about how sometimes that motor would get him into trouble throughout the course of a basketball game. Your big picture thoughts about the freshman year for Sean Stewart?
I mean, he grew from day one to his last day in a Duke uniform, and that's all you can ask for is see progression. And I mean, his best game of his career, of his Duke career, was the one time Duke beat NC State at PNC Arena. And I thought that was where he finally clicked. Everything clicked for him. And I just hate that we couldn't build off that momentum, like I said, going into a sophomore year, because the potential is there for Sean, but we'll deep dive more into him. But yeah, just there's more left to be desired for Sean Stewart.
No doubt about that. Looking at his numbers, 33 games played for Sean Stewart, 8.4 minutes per game. So even when he's getting out there on the floor, there are only 8 minutes of action on average, 2.6 points, 3.2 rebounds, 57% shooting from the floor, 53% shooting from the free throw line, and of course, not a three-point shooter. So no three-point numbers there for Mr. Stewart throughout his freshman season. Pretty aggressive in terms of just the energy, again, that he displayed. A player that didn't have the basketball in his hands by design. If it was, it's just a lob play that Duke found at the rim. But as we saw throughout the course of his freshman season, Jordan, Sean Stewart was not a guy that Duke was going to run any offensive sets for.
Yeah, no, but like you said, my analogy, he goes 85 miles per hour in the school zone sometimes. But sometimes him going 85 miles per hour was a beautiful thing to see. I mean, the one thing that he was really good at, Duke did not really run sets for him, but that was not his game for his freshman year. That's okay. But what he was really good at was 50-50 balls. There was a lot of times this season where Duke always lost 50-50 balls and lost those games. But anytime Sean Stewart was in a possession where it was a loose ball, I feel like he got 90% of those, just even tip outs. He was active, and I wish that was some sort of a stat. Like we see his stats down there, but I can count on both hands and more how many times that he got a rebound or a tip out where he wasn't in the picture when the shot went up, and that's something that you just can't teach.
For Sean Stewart, thinking about the big games that he had over the course of the season, again, those 8 minutes per game. The most minutes that he played in any game this season was at NC State towards the end of the year, the one meeting of the three that Duke actually was able to beat the Wolfpack in that one. That was a game in which he played 26 minutes. The second most minutes that he played on the year was 18 early in conference season. So really, when he was in there weren't like many random games that he was playing a whole lot outside of that NC State one. But he did finish that night with 12 points, 3 blocks, 2 steals, 5 rebounds, just did a whole lot. And we were really kind of buying into what we saw out of Sean Stewart. And one would have thought that, playing that well late in the year, maybe that's something you can carry into this upcoming season. But he ultimately makes the decision to transfer elsewhere.
Yeah, like you said, it was the best game of his season at Duke. It was a very impressive performance. And the one thing that limited his minutes, honestly, was just foul trouble. I mean, there's a lot of times he'd come in and play 4 or 5 minutes and pick up a cheap foul or two, and then he'd have to sit. And he just never really had a rhythm in certain games of the season. But that NC State game, man, I've watched those highlights a couple of times, and he just – when it was clicking for him, it was special to watch, and you can see the type of talent he will have. You can see the potential there for him, and I wish him the best. I really do. I just hate that that's all we got from Sean Stewart, honestly.
You brought that to my attention here, Jordan. That's a good point that you're making about the foul trouble with kind of runs that he would be in there. Over the course of the season, he averaged 1.5 fouls in a contest. But then I look at the per 40 numbers, right, which a lot of people love to look at. It's a great tool. Okay, if this guy gets more minutes, what exactly does he look like? His per 40 rate would be 7.5 fouls per game. And that can't exactly work in a basketball game, Jordan. Good thought, because I had forgotten about his kind of foul trouble struggles.
That's the school zone aspect of the analogy right there, JJ, is going 85 miles an hour. Just say slow down, brake check, because 7.5 fouls per 40 is incredible. It's an incredible stat. Obviously, per 40 is obviously an exaggerated stat to an extent, but that is one of my favorite tidbits of the season. Is if anybody says, why did Sean Stewart not play more? Why didn't Shire play him more? It's like, well, the guy would have fouled out by the second media timeout of the game if he started.
Yeah, no, because you're right. In these per 40, these players are not going to be playing 40 minutes a contest in these scenarios, but it does help you kind of figure out, okay, bigger sample size, what are you going to see in those numbers? Sean Stewart, 12 points, 2.3 blocks, 2.5 steals, and 15 rebounds. I mean, very active player for the minutes that he was out there. Just, hey, you got to stay out of foul trouble a little bit. And with experience, as we look at what he might be for Ohio State, I do think that's something that will improve rather quickly.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, he's a nice piece for Ohio State. They're going to have something – they're going to be very underrated, I think. And I'm curious to see if he does make that jump because he'll have a lot more responsibility going his first year at Ohio State. But, you got to learn not to foul. And, as you see, he was a heck of a shot blocker for Duke. I mean, 6'8", 6'9", whatever he was, could jump and grab a dollar bill off the top of the backboard. And he's going to have that at Ohio State. He's going to have highlight plays like that. But it's the little things like not picking up a foul on a big man. Can he do that consistently in bigger minutes?
Yeah, if you're listening to the podcast and not watching with us on YouTube, I was about to bring that up as well. We've got a still photo here of Stewart in action. I mean, above the rim. Practically denying the shot in that Pitt game, and just something that we saw from Sean Stewart. That's something, of course, that was very evident when he was out there on the floor as well. He broke Zion's freshman vertical record for a Duke basketball player. Bunnies definitely describe his leaping ability and athleticism, man, that we saw over the course of his freshman year.
Yeah, you said it best. I mean, his athleticism was through the roof, no pun intended. He could really jump out of the gym, and he's going to make highlight plays for Ohio State.
All right, that's Sean Stewart. We'll talk about our buddy TJ Power after we take our first time out here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. It's an end-of-season review. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. That's right. FanDuel, of course, is America's number one sportsbook, and it is winner-take-all time in the NBA and NHL, as FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Checking out some numbers for tonight's action. As last night, we saw the Boston Celtics knock off the Indiana Pacers. Jason Tatum and assistant coach Emil Jefferson will be heading to the NBA Finals this next week. Tonight, the Dallas Mavericks have an opportunity to clinch their ticket to the NBA Finals. Currently on FanDuel, the Mavericks are 1.5-point favorites at home over the Minnesota Timberwolves. Again, use promo code LOCKEDON and you can get $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more at FanDuel.com/LockedOn and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel is America's number one sports book. Moving forward here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils, JJ Jackson here alongside my pal Jordan Mann from the Big J and Little J show at J-Man's Takes on X. Quickly, if you will, how about Kyrie Irving, Derek Lively II, a win away from an NBA Finals, and they would have a date with a couple of former Blue Devils and Jason Tatum and then Emil Jefferson on the coaching staff.
Yeah, look, it's going to be a great finals if Dallas can clinch as long as there's not an ultimate choke job by those guys. But I can't wait to see Kyrie Irving back in Boston. That's going to be cinema for how he left, and obviously stepping on Lucky on center court. So I think Kyrie's one of my favorite players, just basketball-wise. It's poetic the way he can move and just the rhythm that he plays the game. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that series, hopefully, as long as the Timberwolves don't win 4 in a row.
Yeah, no doubt about that. All right, let's keep this moving. TJ Power up next as we're doing our final kind of end-of-year review, talking about the season that Power had for the Duke Blue Devils. A freshman coming in from up there in the Boston area, funny enough, talking about those Celtics. Power, a big Celtics fan himself, knew the outside shot would be something big that we would see this season for Duke. How do you look back on the year that he had out there on the floor?
I mean, I said, obviously, with Sean Stewart, maybe I said it with both, that they were young and they developed through the season. TJ Power obviously didn't really play much at all throughout the season. Obviously, in the games where Duke had it handled, he had the runs, but he played – what was the stretch where he was playing a lot of minutes? Who was hurt, JJ?
That's a great question. I know
I just remember he played at the tail end of the
Stretch.
season. He played about 4 to 8 minutes a game where he wasn't playing anything in ACC play.
Right.
And obviously Duke had multiple injuries throughout the year, so just plug one of those guys in the rotation.
It's hard to remember which injury specifically equated to which players getting more run and that sort of thing. Roach missed a few. And Proctor as well, and Power got some more run there.
I think Power progressed and did okay in those roles. He didn't kill Duke like he did early in the season because his points per possession defensively, I think he finished with over 2 points per possession, which is extremely bad in terms of on synergy. But that's manipulated by certain other things too. But he progressed in his role from being no minutes of DNPs to 4 to 8 minutes. And look, we saw lineups with him and Sean Stewart on the court together. And Sean Stewart would play the 4 offensively and then guard the 3 defensively. And you flip that for TJ Power. And it looked okay for Duke. And at the end of the day, man, he just looked like a freshman. And Virginia will be a decent spot for him.
Okay, so 36 games total for Duke on the season. TJ Power appeared in 26 of them, but 6.7 minutes per game when he was there in competition. The most minutes he played at all this season was in the Georgia Tech game back in early December. He played 16 minutes. So he never even played like one full half of basketball. Very, very limited playing time for TJ Power, but that shot looked pretty good when he got some clean looks at it. 35.7% shooting from three-point range, 2.1 points per game. But when you think about it in that context, Jordan, that like, hey, the most minutes this guy played in a game didn't even equate to one half of basketball. You know, you're really not getting a whole or able to see as much from what this guy might be, which leads you to believe that in practice, it wasn't looking as great as some of the other freshmen. And it just comes down to not as many opportunities for him to get out there on the floor.
Yeah. And look, there's a big learning curve going from high school to college, let alone high school to Duke. And the game's just much faster. And the game just looked like it was too fast for TJ Power in the first half of the season. Honestly, probably 3/4 of the season. And then, like I said, you'd see him in spot little segments like a media timeout to media timeout, and he was doing okay, whereas early in the season he was getting cooked and he just looked lost. But look, 36% from 3, and that's with him not having his feet really under him. He's going to be more established in year 2 and a new system with Tony Bennett where it's a slower pace, and I think that's more of his game.
Looking at TJ Power's numbers again, 16 minutes was the most that he had in a LaSalle game back in November. So the first month of the year is when he scored his career high with 9 points in a game. I remember the UNC game, the final game of the season. He was pretty active with the shots he was making down, but went back and looked, he only played 4 minutes in that game. So, was making some shots, but just wasn't out there for a whole lot of run, man, which is tough for our boy TJ there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the LaSalle game, he had single-digit minutes also, and he had 9 points. And so that's also what can make him a special player at the end of his career at UVA, which I know we'll go into, is the guy can light it up quickly when he's on. Like he's 6'9", can shoot it. And look, he had 9 points against LaSalle that quick. He could do that again, and he will do that again in his career.
Per 40 stats on T. We got to do it. We did it for Sean Stewart. Might as well. 12 points for TJ Power, 2.9 fouls, because that was something we looked at for Sean Stewart. 4 rebounds, 1 assist. So obviously the scoring numbers would take a jump for TJ Power. You would think there'd be more shot attempts that would come his way, and you'd be able to see more of that look from the outside. Making the decision to transfer away from Duke, big talented players coming in, kind of in the fold that do a little bit of the same thing as TJ Power. Do you think ultimately that was a big reason why he made the decision to transfer?
Yeah, I mean, Steve Weisman came out with that article talking about John Shire was telling guys nothing was guaranteed coming back to Duke. You got to earn it. You got to come compete. And guys that could return did not return for that reason because there was nothing promised and guaranteed. And TJ Power is one of them because there was a chance that he could get buried on the depth chart. And so he had to go somewhere else where he thought would be better for him to play right away, and that is what Virginia is. And I don't follow recruiting that much, JJ. Obviously, I do when guys commit to Duke. But UVA was in the running for TJ Power coming out of high school, correct?
That's right. Yeah, they were one of the finalists.
So that goes to my narrative that in this day and age of college sports, it's almost better to finish second place because eventually that guy might be coming to you anyways, and you're getting a guy that's like 1 year at Duke rather than a raw prospect coming out of high school.
Yeah, no, finishing runner-up has its advantages in some ways now in college basketball recruiting, which is pretty wild. All right, let's take one more timeout, Jordan. Then when we come back, we'll start to wrap up this episode here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. All right, most definitely want to let you know about our Locked On National Sports channel that we've got going on, the first ever national sports 24/7 YouTube streaming channel, and it's also now available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Again, Locked On Sports Today. Check it all out wherever it is that you get your podcasts, and go check out our YouTube feed as well. We'll bring him back in. Jordan Mann is here with us at J-Man's Takes on X and the Big J and Little J show. Tell us a little bit about your show and things you're working on, Jordan.
Yeah, working on it's the off season for the Big J and Little J show. So we'll make some spot shows here in the off season before we get to football season. Working on things with what to see coming to Duke with film review sessions with the roster that's in place now with guys. Have those breakdowns coming out soon. It's J-Man underscores the YouTube. Please like and subscribe. And and J-Man's Takes is my Twitter handle, and so is the Big J and Little J show.
Go check it all out. It's really good stuff. I couldn't recommend it more. All right, so as we start to wrap up our conversation here today, Jordan, obviously we just went through the 12 guys on the Duke basketball team, 10 guys really, because Reeves and Jaden Shute redshirted, and then you had Spencer Hubbard given that scholarship. The 10 players who are really out there a good bit gave their end-of-year reviews. We're looking back on this season for John Shire in year 2 as the Blue Devils head coach. They finished second in the ACC. They make it all the way to the Elite Eight in the NCAA tournament. What are kind of the big things that you're going to remember about the Duke basketball team? And was this year a success in your eyes?
What I remember the most is, God, that's a great question, JJ, because this team underachieved throughout the year. Felt like they were better than what their record and what the accolades were. I know they finished second or third in the ACC, but losing first round or first game in the ACC tournament to NC State, felt like that was all underachieving, and you didn't beat UNC, underachieved. 1-2 against NC State, lose at Wake Forest. But then in March, they somehow overachieved for me, because you say all that, and I thought this team was going to lose to James Madison as an upset, and they dominated them because Duke flipped a switch in March Madness, and then ultimately lost to NC State in the Elite Eight. But when a team's that hot like NC State was, that just happens. You run into a gauntlet like that. So for the season, I say underachieved, but for the postseason, JJ, for March Madness, I say overachieved.
And you know what reality is? We're going to remember March Madness more than anything, because, we always kind of finish or remember the last things that take place more times often than what happened over the chunk of the season.
Yeah, and we're going to look back and look, Duke was a half away from going to the Final Four. And if you look back as a whole of the season, like I just said, you're like, this team made a Final Four. It's like, yeah, that's what happens in March.
Yeah, it's Duke basketball, man. It's the standard every single year. That's not going to change. And I think we've got those same high standards for this team coming up as well. So really excited to see the new team get together. K Academy has opened up this week. Of course, the fantasy camp that Mike Krzyzewski has had for years and years running for the ultimate diehard of diehard basketball fans. You got to be 35 years or older at least to even be able to go to K Academy and to play and participate. But all Duke fans, Jordan, we just love seeing all the photos that are released to see what former players are back for the event. We're going to be looking for photos of new players to see who's arrived on campus already and all those things. So now that we finished up this end-of-year review, it's fitting because K Academy is here, and we can really start to turn our attention to the new season.
Yeah, man. K Academy, I'm at 30, so I'm 5 years away age eligibility.
But yeah, you're almost there, man.
But my bank account eligibility may never get to that point. So I could be like 55 and still not have the K Academy wallet. But look, it is an exciting time. And like you said, it is really cool to see all the alums and the current players be with those guys because it looks like it's a blast. So I definitely am envious and I'm jealous.
Likewise. Well, Jordan, it's great to see you as always. I'm looking forward to our conversations that come over the course of the summer. Thanks for stopping by. And my friend, we'll do this again soon, okay?
Sounds good, brother.
All right, that's Jordan Mann joining us here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils, and that's going to do it for another show here today. Thank you again for your support as always. Make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Leave us a 5-star rating and written review on Apple Podcasts as well. That'll do it for today's show. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you again tomorrow. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.